Can we please talk about UFC Vegas 24 coming to us live this weekend from the Apex Center in Vegas? The headliner obviously is going to be Kelvin, Gastelum and Robert Whittaker. It's going to be it's a sneakily good night of fights, and there are a couple of underdogs on this card that I think are really worth having a look at. If you are watching this on a Friday evening, congratulations to you and thank you for subscribing to my Patreon. If you're watching this late, then just always bear in mind you can watch this a day early on my Patreon. Link is in the banner on my YouTube page. It's £1 a month, which is an absolute bargain because fights are better on a Friday. That's just science. You can't argue with that. So yeah, let's get into these fights here because this is the Burt Locker fights in 15. So I'm going to get into these fights, have a look at a few underdogs, get a few predictions in, get some terrible bets on, all in about 15 minutes. So first fight I'm going to look at here is it's on the prelims. You've got this fella called Bartosz Fabinski taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Now, Gerald Meerschaert is the fella that took on Khamzat Chimaev a few months ago, got flatlined in a minute. He also lost to Ian Heinisch. Ian Heinisch is better than people give him credit for, I think. But either way, he's coming off of a couple of relatively tough losses. So looking at it here, you've got some really good odds on Meerschaert. Meerschaert's coming in as an underdog. Now, you could say that's rightly so. The odds are all up here. You've got, Fabinski coming in at 1.73 and Meerschaert coming in at 2.10. Okay. Now, what catches my eye here is I think that there's some deceptive kind of odds here because Meerschaert, he's not as bad as his recent run of form suggests, and I don't really see anything that suggests that Fabinski is like the next big thing that's coming up. Do you know what I mean? Because Meerschaert, he's lost to Heinisch, who I really rate, and Khamzat Chimaev, who is beating everybody lately. If he hasn't got COVID when he actually fights, he's like flatlining people or squashing them under his wrestling. But what I'm saying is, when Meerschaert, when he kind of comes good, he really does. You're looking at Meerschaert here. He's like literally, he only loses against like the really kind of good guys, like the up and coming guys, the studs of the division. I don't know for sure if Fabinski is that. Fabinski, he's like 34. Well, he's 35 at the end of this month, right? That's not young for a middleweight. I mean, it's not over the hill either, but yeah, it's not like he's this young kind of killer that's coming up the ranks. I mean, don't get me wrong, Meerschaert's not young either. He's 33, but Meerschaert's got some good submissions, and that's what I'm looking at here, right? Because basically, when you look at it, Meerschaert, when he does win, he tends to get the submission, right? You look at his two chokes over Wynn and Giles, both decent chokes. And Fabinski, his last two losses in the octagon have both come by way of submission. So when you see it's 3.25 on Meerschaert to get the submission, that's the kind of bet that I like because the numbers suggest to me that number one, Meerschaert is pretty good at getting the submission, and number two, Fabinski is susceptible to the submission. So looking at, because like I said, you have to look at who Meerschaert's actually lost to, right? When I say they're studs, look at the names. Heinisch, Khamzat, Anders, Holland, Hermansson, right? Those are his last 5 losses, right? Now, yeah, okay, he's lost like a fair few, but to those guys, they're all studs, man. Like, Fabinski, most of his fights so far have been in Cage Warriors. He's had a couple of like UFC fights, like I said, 2 of them were losses by submission. I think that they're kind of throwing Meerschaert a bone here. I mean, if Meerschaert can't take this guy out, then he's probably getting his walking papers, to be perfectly honest. But I think he can take this guy out by submission, 3.25, add that to the bet slip. We've also got Andrei Olofsky has snuck onto this card. It seems like he sneaks on. He just sneaks onto cards these days. It's like you don't hear anything about him for a little while, and then it's like, oh, look, there he is, and he's taking on the Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman. Right, this one is obviously at heavyweight. Now Olofsky, he's opening up as the favourite here, and kind of rightly so, because I mean, Sherman, he's had a little bit of a tough run of form as of late, and Andrei Olofsky, he still does pull out wins here and there, and But it is only here and there. You look at his wins, it's, Linz, Bosa, Struve and Albini. All decisions, by the way. All, decisions, relatively competitive fights, some of them, Olofsky fights will tend to go to a decision whichever way they go. Now, after losing 3 on the bounce, Chase Sherman, he got his walking papers from the UFC, which is fine. He's now coming off the back of 4 TKO or KO wins, right? Now, 3 of those were in island fights. I don't know what the level of competition is there. I can imagine it's not great, but he did just knock out Villanueva in his last fight, and that's a pretty decent win. And so when you look at this, right, both their height and their reach are basically identical, but Sherman is coming in as the younger guy, and he's coming in with a point to prove. He wants to try and make it in the heavyweight division. He's coming off a knockout win. I do think that as an underdog, I quite like Sherman in this one, purely because, look, Olofsky is not unbeatable. Do you know what I mean? We know that. But, we also, on the flip side, he can pull out a win where he needs to. So I'm not saying, this one, it is shaping up to be a close fight on paper. But I do think that Chase Sherman, he has the momentum going in. You know what I mean? He's coming off 4. It doesn't matter who they're against. If you're coming off 4, stoppage, knockouts in a row, that you're going in with some confidence. And, some fighters thrive on that. And, so the height and reach are basically identical. And Olofsky, he is getting old, man. Sometime that is going to catch up with him. It has to. So when you're looking at the odds here, there are a few decent bets. Like I said, Chase Sherman is coming in as the underdog, but I wouldn't hate Chase Sherman TKO stoppage. That's 3.75. But what I've put on my actual bet slip is just purely Chase Sherman to win. I'm taking him as the underdog in this fight because I do feel like this one could go either way, but coming in as an underdog, I do like Chase Sherman here. 2.10, that is being added to the bet slip. So Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum, main event, £185. The winner of this one likely gets Israel Adesanya in a rematch. Both of them have fought Israel Adesanya before. Both of them had, actually, only one of them had a competitive fight with Adesanya. Look, Kelvin Gastelum took Adesanya right to the limit and more, whereas, Bobby Knuckles, with respect, it wasn't his best outing when he fought Adesanya. He got basically flatlined. Now, this is a very good fight stylistically. It should be a really fun one for the fans because both guys are pretty good in the grappling. They both like to stand and trade. They've both been in wars. They're both durable. Do you know what I mean? They both dish out punishment really well. On paper, this is almost a perfect fight, which is why I'm super excited about it, because when you put these guys together, this could be spectacularly good because it's just it's likely not going to end early. It's likely to be back and forth. But when you look at the odds here, there is obviously, I know why they've put the odds like this, but I still think that it's not quite right because Robert Whittaker is 1.36 the favourite. Kelvin Gastelum is 3.25 against, right? That is crazy. Kelvin Gastelum has a much better chance of winning this fight than that. He just does. Kelvin Gastelum is one of the best guys in that middleweight division. He's knocked people out all over the place. His hands are ridiculously fast, preposterously fast. And his wrestling is actually really good. We saw that against Heinisch. Against Heinisch, he employed his wrestling and he used more of his all-round game, and he showed that he can game plan for somebody. Because Heinisch, he is a dangerous guy. We've seen that, we saw that when he fought Meerschaert. We saw that when he is just a dangerous opponent. So, for Gastelum to take that fight, that was him rolling the dice, because obviously Heinisch is not ranked in the top 10 as far as I'm aware. But, but my point is that Gastelum made short work of it, But with that still being said, Gastelum has lost 3 of his last 4, and that is why he's the underdog here. It has nothing to do with his skill, right? Because skill-wise, this is a really even fight. And I'd say that Whittaker's maybe got... I don't know where his advantages are, actually. But like I say, I don't necessarily know where Gastelum's advantages are over Whittaker, but I don't know where Whittaker's advantages are over Gastelum. I feel like they're very similar stylistically. And I think that Robert Whittaker will have a slight reach, and he is a slightly bigger guy, but that's no no, that's not news to Gastelum. Gastelum's always fighting guys that are bigger. I mean, he is an overblown welterweight, really. That might have played a factor into the odds, but he has looked excellent at middleweight. Middleweight is Gastelum's home. Do you know what I mean? And don't forget, like I said, look, before, Adesanya ran away with the final round, in that fight with the champion, we know how good Adesanya is. Kelvin Gastelum made that a really competitive fight. Really competitive. So if I'm honest, 3.25 against is kind of insulting. The odds should be much closer than that. Now, the odds might not be this, far apart tomorrow. I've got a feeling people are going to start throwing some money down on Kelvin Gastelum, because I'm about to, right? Because, Whittaker, like I said, 3 of his last 4, he's won. But again, they're all decisions, and some of them were close. Look how close it was with, Darren Till. Obviously, the Cannonier fight wasn't close. That was a whitewash. But with respect, I would probably pick Gastelum to beat Cannonier as well. You know what I mean? So, when you look at it, it's like, okay, on a lot of those fights, the 3 of his last 4, Gastelum's lost. But 2 of them were very close decisions. Do you know what I mean? Against Till, it was a split decision. And honestly, you didn't know whose hand was getting raised at the end of that. And so when you look at Whittaker's record, it's like, yeah, okay, he's won 3 of his last 4. But a few of those wins, at the end of it, it's like, okay, who's getting their hand raised here? My point is, they're just literally, the only difference is a kind of judge's scorecard. It's like one judge that's between these guys on their record. And I think that's what the bookies have looked at here, because it looks like, Gastelum's got a really salty record, but his record doesn't really reflect his skill. Gastelum is extremely skilled. He's going to take this fight to Robert Whittaker. I quite fancied him to win this before I saw the odds. Now that I've seen the odds, because don't get me wrong, this one, stylistically, it should be an excellent fight because they're so evenly matched. For me, this is a coin toss. When one side of that coin is 3.25 against, you put that on your goddamn bet slip. It's happening. It's happening. That has gone on the bet slip. Boom. So, when I put I'm putting all of those onto one bet, putting my treble down. I say, so you've got Meerschaert, the submission, you've got Sherman to win, and Gastelum to win. That is 22.18, so circa 21 to 1. That is well worth having a go on. I've got a single on each one of those as well. Again, I'm not putting much money down because otherwise I'll just lose money all over the place. But, yeah, like I said, I don't think it's a medium terrible bet, because the problem here is going to be the Meerschaert submission, which incidentally is my pick of the week. But my pick of the week went wrong last time. This week could be no exception, because the problem with this is that you're picking the method. But I do like those odds. I think that Meerschaert wins this one by submission. That's why it's my pick of the week, because I do think that when you look at everything that's gone into this fight, when you look at the 2 fighters, one is good at pulling out submissions, the other is susceptible to submissions, and Meerschaert is the underdog, but only because he's been beaten, by quite a lot of people. When you look at the people he's been beaten by, I don't know if Fabinski is quite on that same level. So I just think there is value there. That's why that's my pick of the week, because there is value in that bet. 3.25 on Meerschaert to get the submission, and like I said, my treble, Meerschaert submission, Sherman to win, Gastelum to win, 22.18. Terrible bets, right? We'll see how these go. I'll be reviewing these on the Wednesday, and I'll be really looking forward to seeing these fights. They should be a really good night of fights. So, and I'll just like to say again, thank you for all your support. Everyone that likes and subscribes, if you enjoy the content, please like and please subscribe. And if you want to see these picks on a Friday night, get your picks in on the Friday. Patreon gets exclusive access to my Burt Locker Fights in 15 every Friday around kind of 8:30, 9 o'clock. The video will usually go up. If you'd like to support me on my Patreon, please go to the banner on my YouTube, click on the Patreon link, and it's £1 a month. And all your support would be greatly appreciated, because it will just allow me to make the show better and better. But like I said, I just appreciate people liking and subscribing. So until we meet again, keep those odds long and those bets terrible.